Welcome to Character Study. I am John Fortt, back again with David Tieche. And, this is where we're talking about the character of people in the Bible, what that illuminates for us about the character of God, about our relationship with God, perhaps about our own character. And I'm a journalist. Dave's a pastor. We've been friends for 30 years or so.
Every time you say it, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Decades and decades and decades and decades.
Yes.
In fact, I was just reflecting in my own heart and mind the last time that Ohio State, I'm a big Ohio State fan. Last time Ohio State won the national title, we were roommates in San Jose. We were living in the same place. And we went to a wedding. Our buddy Josh had just gotten married. We were both in the wedding. And we got back, and I had to record it on a TiVo that you had. Do you remember TiVo?
That was cutting edge technology back then.
Cutting edge. And so we recorded it on TiVo, but you could only record in blocks. So I made sure to record the post-game show just in case the game went long. Well, the game went into overtime. And so we sat down, and it was like 9:45 at night, 10 o'clock at night. And I was like, I'm going to watch this national championship game. And you check the score and you're like, oh boy. And I was like, what? And you're like, nothing. And what you had seen as the game went into overtime, it went really long. And you're like, I'm going to go to bed. And so you fell asleep on the couch, and I was watching this game. And as it came down to the final drive, the final possession, the TiVo cut out. So I was like, whoa, who won? So I had to go online. But that goes back to 2003. So that's and we'd been friends for like a decade before that. So.
That's right.
So it's a really long time.
We met and became friends in college, and now you've got kids in college. We've got more kids heading to college. So
yes, we do.
Generational. So today we're back to talk about Lot. We've been we started with Abraham, and we've gone through talked about Abraham for a couple of sessions, Sarah, Hagar, and now Lot is this very interesting person in the Bible. A lot of it because he contrasts with Abraham.
Yeah.
His values contrast, his actions contrast. And we talked in the first conversation about who Lot is and his initial sort of disagreement, more economic, right, property type disagreements with Abraham, how Abraham rescues him in this time of war and what that shows. And now we're getting into what most people know about and think about when they think about Lot, which is Sodom and Gomorrah. And Lot had chosen to live in Sodom. And earlier in Genesis, it contrasts this decision of Lot deciding to live in a place that looks good, but where the people are wicked, and Abraham making a different decision about giving Lot the choice of where to live and separating so they don't have conflict. And now we're coming to a situation where those decisions, the consequences play out. And it's reminiscent for me of Noah and the flood and what rescue looks like and what perhaps choosing not to be rescued looks like, which reminds me a bit of C.S. Lewis. Maybe we'll get into that. And so you wrote a master's thesis on this, and the bulk of it is going to be in Genesis 19. So we're skipping ahead a few chapters from where we last left it. What's your reflection on the difference between Lot and Abraham, and really what the character of Lot says about us, about those who are seeking a relationship with God, or maybe not seeking a relationship with God, maybe seeking adjacency to God without so much loyalty or relationship?
Oh man, there's so much. I want to get into the story because sometimes, I don't know if this ever happens to you. You like read the biblical story that you've read before, and you're like, whoa, there's a lot in there I don't remember. So we're going to see that. But it does feel like last week you made the point, it's like almost like a foil. Like Lot and Abraham are like foils of each other. Like one's a negative example and one's trying to be more of a positive example of what it looks like to walk with God. Not like one's a hero and one's a villain. It's just because there's really only one. We've already seen that Abraham's not a hero, but it's just ways to live with God, right? And ways to walk with God. And that's what Abraham is trying to teach us. And today, there's this moment in Genesis 18 where like God comes down to talk and walk with Abraham. And that's in 18. God comes down with, I still can't figure this out. It looks like 2 bodyguards. So he's got his crew. He comes down with 2 angels, and it's clearly God himself coming down. And he appears to where Abraham's camp is, his like homestead. And it's by the great trees of Mamre. And that's a little Hebrew idiom, a Hebrew word. Basically, Mamre is the word that sounds identical to the word vision. And basically, Abraham's going to have another vision of what God's like and what God wants, right? And so it's another apocalypse, another revelation to Abraham about who this God is. Remember earlier in Egypt, he's like, well, there's a famine. I guess I got to grab and take things into my own hands. I got to do things that I need to do. And I can't really rely on this God because who knows? And God shows up and is like, no, just listen to what I say. I'll take care of you. You don't have to grab and make your own way in this world. I'll be with you. So that's kind of a revelation that he has, right? So God appears, and it's in Genesis 18. He appears to Abraham while he's sitting. Abram looked up. When he saw them, he hurried to the entrance of his tent to meet him and bowed low to the ground. So that's his posture, right? So that matters. He says, if I found favor in your eyes, don't pass. Wash your feet, rest by this tree. Let me get you something to eat, right? So this is what's called biblical hospitality or hospitality. And this is a big deal in the ancient world. There weren't like inns or la quintas that you could stay at, There was just not there was not like holiday inns you could just stay at. So hospitality of strangers was critically important in a world that was pretty brutal. Where travel was really risky and where resources were not always plentiful, like fresh water or food. So his posture is one of incredible hospitality. And that really matters because it says, you're my treasured guest. And he's doing this to God, right? And then it's really interesting. I'm going to say a line that's going to sound like a throwaway, but it's actually going to become very important later on. Abraham goes to Sarah and says, quick, get 3 seahs, which is like a unit of measurement, like 3 sacks of the finest flour and make some bread. So a seah is about 20 pounds of flour. So 3 seahs is 60 pounds of flour. That's a lot of bread. I'm just saying that's a lot of bread. This is a carbo load. And then he goes to his herd. He's got the choice tender calf, and then he gets some curds and milk, and then they prepare the calf. So it's like veal parmesan and bread, unlimited breadsticks. It's Olive Garden. What he's doing, it's like when you're here, your family, right? And they eat. They share this meal, right? And we're going to skip over there's the moment where Sarah laughs. But then what happens is as the men are getting up to leave, and this is in Genesis 18, they look down to Sodom. So he's up on a hill, looks down at Sodom. Now, Sodom is rich. It is lush. We've just seen that there was a war between tribal kings over the resources. Lot chose it because it was wealthy, because not wealthy. It was lush and rich and green, tons of resources. And then there's a really interesting moment. They're walking and they look, and then God says out loud, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? And this is a rhetorical question. And then he's like, nope, I'm not going to hide from Abraham. I'm going to tell Abraham what I'm about to do, which is God kind of showing and revealing who he is and what he's about, which is a big deal. God doesn't have to do that, right?
Right. And this reminds me, in a way, of the beginning of the book of Job, right? Where you have God and the angels gathering. In that case, Satan shows up and there's all that. But it's almost like, there's 3 beings here. Yahweh is one of them. And there's you don't get to see this kind of inside conversation, but maybe one is talking to the other 2. right?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It's like you said, it's almost like peeling back the curtain to see the inner dialogue of what got. Now that dialogue in Job is not really fun. He's like, "Have you considered my servant Job?" It's like, how about you don't bring me up here, because. But your point in Job is it's a view behind the scene, right? Like how this interaction between these spiritual beings, Satan and Yahweh, actually go.
Not only that, but how consequences begin, right? They're having a conversation that's about to play out in the lives of men.
Yes.
Right? Here's the pre-story. Here's the explanation for why this big thing that is about to happen is going to happen. So that's what's in Job. They're like, hey, have you considered Job? Okay, well, here are the ground rules, right? Similar conversation here is Yahweh is saying, something's about to go down. Should I tell Abraham or not? He's kind of important. So, okay, let's bring him into the conversation.
But exactly. But there's a really particular line, which for me has become a verse that I think is one of the most consequential in the entire Bible. And it's consequential not just because it reveals who God is, but it reveals like what we are. And it's right there. He says, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? And then God's like, no, I'm going to tell him. I'm going to tell him what I'm about. And he says, Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all the nations on earth will be blessed through him. And he says, for I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he's promised him. There's so much in here. Basically, I've chosen him, God says, so that Abraham will be a certain type of man who will be right and just like me. He'll walk in the way of me. He'll look and be like me. Remember, back in Genesis, the whole point is for us to be image bearers that look and act like God, where God's representatives, but we also are supposed to have his essence. And that doesn't just mean that we act like the king, that we have the internal, well, in this case, right and just. Those words are tsedeq and mishpat, which are justice and righteousness. And those words are so important. They're used more than 150 times throughout the Old Testament. And they're almost always linked together. They're like the right AirPod and the left AirPod. The Hebrew word for this is a hendias. It's a combination of two words that almost always go together, like peanut butter and jelly or law and order. Those are words that we use together that kind of are supposed to go together. And justice and righteousness always go together. The first part, how I explain it to my kids as they were kind of growing up, is righteousness that's a weird word. Like when I think of the word righteous, I think of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. It's like which is super dating me.
I was about to say
that's old. That's old school Keanu. That's not John Wick Keanu, right?
It's far from John Wick.
Right. Boy, who would have ever guessed that guy would be the premier action star 40 years later? Anyway. So righteous just means that you do what's right and you love what's right. That you have this. It's from the root word tsedeq, which means straight. Meaning you keep things on the straight path, right? You don't deviate from what is right. And it flows from God's. So it's right with God, right? So you're right with God, but then you're right with other people too. It has a social dynamic. Mishpat is a little different. It means setting things right. So when things get broken, you do what you can to use what you have and who you are to set things right if you can. And that's so basically, in essence, if everyone were righteous, if everyone did everything right all the time, there would be no need for justice because nothing would be broken, right? Does that make sense? But when it gets violated, then you have to go about and set it right. And this is what God says Abraham's supposed to be about. And then he juxtaposes that. Now, here's why that's important. Abraham's supposed to be a man of righteousness. He's going to do what's right and just. And then somehow, by that ethical character, all the nations of the world will be blessed. Because of course they will. In a world filled with injustice and weirdness and greed and terribleness, of course somebody who is right and just is going to bring blessing because they're going to set things right and love what's right and help people set things right and know what is right. And then he juxtaposes that immediately. The next verse is about Sodom and Gomorrah, where things have gone very far from right and just. So you've got Abraham, who's this model, who's supposed to be an image bearer, who's right and just. And then he says, I'm here because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin is so grievous that I'm going to go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. And if not, I'll know. And that word outcry is a supercharged word. It's used a number of times. The people of Israel use it. It says the outcry reached them when they were enslaved under Pharaoh. So in Exodus, we're going to see that word. And then actually in the law of Moses, it's used a couple times and this is a little graphic. It's used to describe the scream for help of a woman being sexually assaulted. So this is it's a plaintive, desperate, aching cry for help by someone being hurt or violated or oppressed. And God actually hears these cries and he comes down. This is how bad things are in Sodom. So you juxtapose justice and righteousness of Abraham to Sodom and Gomorrah, and it is something really terrible is happening, and God's coming to investigate. And that's the story. And that I think it's incredible that God hears these cries and he's coming down to get involved. To your point, it does feel vaguely reminiscent to the horror of Genesis 6 with Noah. So I think there is definitely a hyperlink there.
And for a moment, let's consider two things that just seem interesting to me in the way this story is told and framed. One, God is essentially deciding whether Abraham gets to be in the room where it happens. Right.
Yeah.
Am I just going to tell him? Is he going to find this out in the news reports? Or am I going to let him in the room to understand what's about to happen? And so the character and righteousness of Abraham is the justification for him getting into the room where it happens, where the decisions are being made, kind of like where the angels are, right? That's what we see playing out in Job. Hey, we're having the conversation. Abraham gets to be in here, and here's why. Two, the omniscient, all-powerful, ever-present God is going to physically go and investigate what's happening in Sodom. It's not like, really? Like you couldn't just look down there? You're gonna actually go stay the night, God? What's that about exactly? But I mean, in the construction of it, whether you're reading this as a linear narrative story or reading for the meaning, you have this instance where Abraham is in the area that he chose when he and Lot divided, and God comes and gets hospitality from Abraham, and kind of delivers again a promise to Abraham. And now he's about to go to Lot in the area where he decided to be, get hospitality, and deliver a promise, right? Based on where he has decided to be. We're getting the consequences of the values-based decision that Abraham and Lot each made about where they physically decided to be. And God has physically appeared to deliver that judgment, right?
Yeah. And that's uncomfortable. But here's why it's good. If God did not confront this kind of outcry head on, would he be good? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I hear that, but there's something troubling to me as a human being reading this is that outcry is so great, and he stops at Abraham's for bread and cheese before going to check it out. Like, come on now, aren't we on a scale? Like, there's some people desperately crying out. Shouldn't you get on down there? Like, but God's wisdom and prior to decision, like this is in an allegory kind of framework as well. But I don't, as a human being, given the nature of that outcry word that you just outlined, that's something that raises an alarm for me. It's kind of like, okay, you get a 911 call, but let me get some dinner first before
and the firemen stop at Olive Garden.
Right.
Well, we're about to see. I love what you said. Like God could have just done this himself. He could have just snapped a finger or zapped it, or just looked on high, and he doesn't. And his ways are almost always really slow, much slower than you and I would like. He's very deliberate and intentional about this, but he's involving an image-bearing child, Abraham, and Sarah, in this story when he didn't really need to. You know, he could have just done whatever he wants. And this is the thing that's always shocking to me, that God involves humans in his plans for rescue and redemption. Or in this case, well, he's about to have a rescue mission, but it's going to be bad, right? He always involves humans. And I never quite understand. It's like, it would be so much more efficient and fast if God just did it himself. But somehow involving us changes us and actually knits us together with God's heart. He wants to walk with us. And that's just the way God works. And I mean, think about later on in the story with Mary, a teenage girl. Like, he could have just made a baby plop down, right? He could have. He could have just sent Jesus like a meteor, like Superman, just put him in a little rocket and have him crash land in Iowa and have the parents find him, right? That could have been the origin story of the Messiah. But he has like Mary, some teenage girl, carry him like in kind of danger, and Joseph, this guy who's like a nobody too, has to go through all this turmoil, and he protects Mary and stays with her and provides for her. Why would God do this? This is incredibly inefficient.
Also,
but apparently he's up to something. He wants us to be involved in it. And so that's and this is Genesis 18. This is very early in the story, and we're going to see this pattern forever. This is the rest of the Bible.
Also high on the list of why did God do that is this moment at the end of chapter 18, which might remind one of conversation with Moses, where he's like, I'm sick of these Israelites. I'm going to wipe them out. And Moses is like, oh, God, well, do you really want to do that? Because what are the headlines going to look like? What are people going to say, right? And so God changes his mind. At the end of Genesis 18 here, there's this sort of bargain taking place where God's like, yeah, if there's 50 righteous people there, I won't destroy it. And Abraham's like, well, what if there's 40? Guy's like, okay, 40, if there's 40, then okay, 40, I hear you. 40 is a lot, but what if there's 30 really solid people? And Abraham bargains God down from 50 to 10.
Yeah.
If there's 10 good folks down there, then Sodom doesn't get turned to a piling heap of...
Right. And it's interesting that this is utterly fascinating, that basically Abraham, he approaches God really respectfully. And then he begins to, and bargain actually, I thought that's the right word, bargain or haggle. But if that's bargaining and haggling, God's actually terrible at bargaining and haggling, because the whole point of bargaining and haggling is like, hey, John, you're selling that original Fuji's record in the vinyl, the score, you're going to sell it for $150. I'll give you $100 for it. And you're like, well, 125. I'm like 110. And then we get to 115 in the middle, right? That's bargaining. On this, every time Abraham makes a suggestion, God's like, fine. He completely capitulates every time. And the other thing that's interesting that I didn't find this out, scholars tell me, is the rule of threes. The rule of threes is like a big literary thing, like 3 times this, 3 times that, right? And Abraham lobbies God 6 times. So it's 3 times 2. Does that make sense? He lobbies forever. So in the story, it's almost like comical how many times Abraham keeps lobbying for God to do this. And his reason is it's not fair. It's your sense of justice. He's like, are you really going to sweep away the righteous in that city with all the wickedness? What if there's righteous people in there? We got to get them out. And God's like, fine. He's like, what if I find 45? What if I find, 50, and he keeps going down and he gets down to, what's he get down to? 10, right?
10. You mentioned God not bargaining from a very kind of capitalistic position. That reminds me of Abraham. We were talking about that last time, how Abraham and Lot, he didn't go in trying to get certainly the best for himself. He didn't even go in trying to get a fair shake, right? Yeah. And so maybe what this is showing us is that Abraham's not so much a bad negotiator. That's not what we should, but Abraham's actually more reflecting the character of God, where he's like, well, what's really important to me in this instance is not getting the best for myself.
Right.
It's the principles. And God knows how many righteous people They're
He does.
actually,
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
does.
so even though Abraham appears to win by getting the number down so low, it still doesn't change the outcome here.
Yeah, but I love your point there. Basically, God and Abraham are having this conversation, and God's actually allowing Abraham to actually reflect the kind of care and concern for a great city that God himself has. And so he's like teaching Abraham even in this, like who God actually is. His concern and his coming down is mirrored by Abraham. And we're supposed to see that. I think we're supposed to see that we're the kind of people who should be concerned about our neighbor. There's an old ancient Jewish saying in the Talmud: whoever is merciful to his fellow beings is without a doubt the child of our father Abraham. Whoever is unmerciful to his fellow beings certainly cannot be the child of Abraham, our father. So there's a saying even in the ancient Talmud that
heavy.
This mercy toward others, even others who are not great, is a sign of what it means to be a child of Abraham. So I just think that's really interesting that as people have reflected on this for ages, the concern for the city is in the heart of Abraham. It reminds me later on, if we can fast forward, there was another person who stood over a city that was bent on destruction, that was about to get destroyed by the Romans, and Jesus weeps for Jerusalem. And he's like, "How I've longed to rescue you." It feels similar to me.
Yeah, for sure, like a mother hen.
Yeah.
Well, it's looking like we're going to have a lot part 3, but
I'm sorry. There's just so much in this, right?
No, it's nothing to apologize. It's good. We have to unpack this before we even get to Genesis 18.
Yeah, and we're not even 19. It 19, goes down. Yeah. 19, it goes down. 19. Right.
Yeah. And so God shows up with Abraham. There's 3 dudes.
Yeah.
One of them peels off. Seems like Yahweh peels off because the 2 angels in Genesis 19, it says 2 angels came to Sodom at evening.
Yeah.
Right. So 3 head off from Abraham, 2 show up at Sodom.
Yeah.
And Lot sitting at the gate, which suggests to me his level of importance.
Yeah. The idea that elders or the city officials, the head politicians sit at the gate. I guess that's the idea, right?
He seems to immediately recognize the importance of these people, addressing them as my lords, inviting them to his house. And they say, "No, we'll camp out outside." And Lot's like, "I don't know what you've heard about Sodom.
I don't know what you know about this city
neighborhood, but this isn't really that kind of place. I really think you should come inside." Yeah.
And then the story gets real weird.
Yeah. So they come inside. Verse 3, he makes them a feast, bakes unleavened bread. In a way, this is parallel to Abraham,
It is. Yeah. I think we're supposed to see that. Yeah.
They show up. There's bread, right? There's fellowship. But before they lay down, and I'm reading from the World English Bible, chapter 4, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both young and old, all the people from every quarter, right? So lest one think that this is just one little group of people.
Right.
The expression is, now this is pretty much representative of what the city is.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came in to you this night? Bring them out to us that we may have sex with them." Well, that's direct.
Yeah.
So by modern social standards, this is a difficult text to deal with, but we're just talking about this as a character study and within the context of what it is. And so the way I would address this is this is not, there's no pickup lines being delivered here. There's no, niceties. This is basically an assault that is playing out. There's a crowd of people. There's a mob saying, "We are planning to sexually assault these visitors to your home."
This was really confusing for me when I was, because this part of the story has always been like, what's going on here? And And there's even some cultural thinking about this that has always confused me. And so I was trying to figure this out, and I read all the historians and theologians I could, right? Tell me if this helps. It might. A lot of commentaries proposed that the horrific act of sexually assaulting a visitor to a town would be such a staggering violation of hospitality and the ancient custom of hospitality that news would naturally spread around the region, which would dissuade and prevent visitors or people from settling or entering into that area for fear, which would allow, the commentators hypothesized, for the local people there to keep all the resources of the region to themselves. So yes, it is debased and it is a sexual thing, but it's not really about sexual appetite. It's actually greed that drives this behavior. And later on in the Bible, when Sodom is condemned by other biblical writers, Isaiah, Ezekiel, whenever Sodom is brought up, it's not the sexual appetites that's condemned. It's the greed and the abuse of the poor and the outcry that reached God. So yes, it shows the wickedness, but there's a wickedness underneath the wickedness, like a reason underneath it. That helped me kind of make sense of it, because it reminds me also of like the Tower of Babel. Because again, this is Noah, right? Remember, Noah the whole city was wicked. And then right after that, the whole world goes wicked. The Tower of Babel was basically, let's make a tower and let's enslave everybody and keep everybody here so we can have our slave labor. So that's actually an economic thing too. So we see hints that there's, and then Pharaoh, of course, keeps the Hebrew people and he keeps them for economic reasons. This is his slave labor. So people wanting to, greed does seem to be an incredibly strong motivator for human societies. And it has been since the beginning. That helped me make sense of it. Even if I can't enter into the ancient context, does that help, or does that feel, what are your thoughts on that, John?
This is the journalist here.
Okay.
Seems like a stretch.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it seems, where are the men who came into you this night? Bring them out to us that we may have sex with them. I mean, that's a pretty bold, arresting detail to put up front. If what you're really trying to talk about is economic dynamics and shows of dominance or dissuasion from, right? Like, it's like, okay. Like, I can see how you might make that kind of backstory argument, but dealing with the text right in front of us and understanding not only some of the attitudes in the cultural context of the time, but even what's going to emerge in the law, right? Once we get beyond Genesis into Leviticus, et cetera, it really does seem like we're supposed to view the way these men of Sodom are operating as not being a good thing.
Oh yeah, sure. We're supposed to recoil here. Yeah.
Across multiple different avenues. Like, yeah, it's not just that
the wickedness is more than skin deep. Yeah. It's rotten.
It's not just that they have some raucous parties, right? And that they dress a little edgy, and right, that they enjoy George Michael and Pat Benatar a little more than, right? It's not, it's like these, it's not just their appetites. It's also their violence and their their cruelty. And so the other part of this that raises questions, and I think is disturbing, both on the men of Sodom side and on the Lot side, is here's Lot the negotiator, right? Who got the best land for himself. And he's like, oh, I know. How about instead of me sending these two men out to you, I send my daughters out, my virgin daughters out. Yeah. Whoa. How is that your first? How is that any fallback? But how is that your first offer in this bargain? Like, that's,
and remember, where was Lot before? He's at the city gates with his bro Abraham, right? So Lot is clearly some sort of, he's in the know in this city. Like, he is, he's at the city gates, a public place, right? And you think, oh, he's righteous, but it's like, no, man, he's hypocritical, right? This is crazy that this is his first, instinct. So it shows that Lot is not what he seems either, because this is not a righteous act to give up your daughters to protect Lot. I mean, that's horrible as well,
And I'm not sure that Lot is not as he seems so much as he's not as Abraham is. Like, we've already gotten the contrast of Lot's values to Abraham's. And Lot's had to be rescued before because he chose to live in Sodom.
Yeah.
Right? And despite the fact that he was rescued, he was still determined to live there because it was lush, because it looked good, because of the material.
Had the money. He made money, man, off the hills, right?
Yeah, it had that hold on him. And now, the consequences are playing out. And what he's willing to give up in this situation
to keep
is still showing forth like a problem in values. When Abraham's family members were in danger from a hostile force, he took the military forces that he had prepared already and he went to war. He fought for justice because of his righteousness. Lot seems to have no such preparation, even though he knows the wickedness of the city. Right? He knows where he's chosen to be. He knows well enough to tell these strangers, don't sleep outside, right? But he doesn't fight for his family. He bargains with his family.
Yeah, uses them as bargaining chips. Yeah, and we talked about last week the definition of wicked versus righteous. Wicked disadvantages other people to take for yourself, and righteous disadvantages yourself for the sake of others. If there's anybody you should be protecting in a familial relationship, it should be your daughters, especially your young daughters, who are particularly at risk at this violent mob. And that doesn't even cross Lot's mind. It reminds me of all those characters across literature and story who are incredibly good at talking. They're bargainers. Lot thinks he can maybe bargain his way out of this, maybe. And then look how they respond to him. John, they respond to him and his words have no gravitas. Get out of our way. You came here as a foreigner and now you want to play judge? We'll treat you worse than them. And they kept moving forward to break down the door.
Even though it's tempting for us to look at Lot and shake our heads and go, this guy. Yeah. Character, so many issues. I would never do that. I would argue, character-wise, Lot in this narrative stands in the place of most church-going Christians, in the sense that Lot immediately recognized who these guys were.
It's bad.
No, I mean, he immediately recognized who the angels were.
Oh, I see.
Sitting outside the gate.
No, it's true. Yeah.
He wasn't like, who are these weird dudes? He's like, my lords, right? He's saying, Lord, Lord. He's trying to be hospitable. He's welcoming them into his home. He's participating in praise and worship, right? He's listening.
He mirrors what Abraham did, right?
Right. Up to a point.
And then
he recognizes that the agents, he recognizes God. He's communicating with God, right? He's not trying to be like, get this God stuff out of here.
Right.
I want to turn, but his values are still off because he's grounded in, living in, and holding on to, quote unquote, the world. What's secular, what's material. And how many of us, if we're honest, are doing these kind of bargains in our heads all the time, even though we know that, not just the place where we physically live, but the lifestyles that we're living in, the influences that we embrace around us, etc., are not pleasing to God, that God can't be openly reflected up against the thing that we're living in. We try to make it okay. Oh, well, I can watch this, listen to this, talk this way, vote this way. it's okay. These things can coexist. When anybody looking at it, and arguably from God looking at it can say, no, but we're like, yeah, but God, you don't want to sleep outside, right? Cover your eyes. You don't want to actually see what goes on. But it's you're with me though, and I recognize you, God, and so this is just how it's done here. I'm putting myself in this bucket as well. I think we all have to be careful. Are we living in a place of Sodom, trying to welcome God in and bargain with the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, there's even going back to when I was a kid, my parents would tell me, who you hang out with matters. Your friends are going to reflect your destiny. So choose your friends wisely. This society and culture has deeply affected Lot, and has, in a sense, kind of trying to live in it and bargain with it is corrupted. It shows that it's corrupted Lot, and it's about to turn even more tragic, which is the worst part about it.
And it's interesting to me too that it's not until God shows up that this becomes a real problem for Lot.
Interesting.
Like he was
like if he had actually been a proper image bearer, he would have had a problem a long time before this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's sort of like, I know I've been there. It's when your Christian friend shows up, right?
Right, because we slowly boil, like the frog. It just happens, and sometimes we need the clarion vision of somebody with clarion vision to like help us see. Oh, like what? Like the scales fall off our eyes, like in Paul. Like, oh man, I had not realized how far I had walked. I had not realized how far I had been I had compromised my own values, or compromised the heart of God, or become not quite as devoted to righteousness and justice. That it just happens, and it can be slow if we don't have that kind of, well, in this case, a good friend like Abraham and God Himself coming down. So.
Yeah, a lot is connected in all the right ways, despite, and hey, we are connected as well, right? So in a way, this rescue, this redemption of Lot probably also points to Jesus and the unmerited favor that we receive because of His death and resurrection. It's sort of like, while we were yet sinners, right? As Paul says,
because this is going to be a rescue mission, and once again, Abraham's going to come in really kind of to get Lot. You're going to see it. He's going to try to get Lot and get out of there because, we're going to see that in the next chapter. I can't believe this has gone 3, but I had a feeling it might.
You did. Yeah. I was like, maybe we can get it done.
It's really because there's so much in this. There's so much richness. But I think we're supposed to be horrified by Lot's behavior, right? I think that's what it's supposed to do in us, to make us reflect on ourselves, like you just said, and say, oh man, are there ways where I've compromised this? I've been compromised. Where
Lot is like the protagonist in a horror movie here, right? Where you're really supposed to be horrified by the monster outside the door, but you're also like, don't answer the door. What are you? No, don't do that. How could you? Now you're really gonna,
I guess the dumb protagonist. It's not like the main character, right. The dumb guy with him, right? I can't think of an example. I'm not much on scary movies. They scare me, but I'm sure that there's an example of somebody who thinks that they have a good idea and it actually ends up being the worst thing for everybody, right?
Yeah. I think, usually the protagonist makes a couple of dumb moves in there somewhere.
Sure,
like,
for sure.
But in this story, in Genesis 19, for the most part, there's no Abraham. There's like, it's Lot and his family, and are they going to get out? And he's kind of trying to do the right thing, but oh man, he's in the wrong place, and he never should have, stayed in bought that haunted house to begin with, and he never.
But it was such a nice mansion.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, it's the same thing, right? Lot sees it and he's like, "Look at this! Look at these nice hills! Look at this green lush! I like the good life."
Yeah,
and he liked the good life of Sodom society. He loved making money off its citizens. He was at the gate. He has a place of power, but he didn't realize that it was going to cost him. He had slowly become a person that was not right and just, that did not reflect and walk in the way of Yahweh.
So yes, next time
we got to finish the story.
The Exodus before the Exodus.
Yes. No, honestly, that's what Mm-hmm.
With a bit of salt thrown in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty tragic. We'll get to that next week.
Yep. All right. This has been Character Study Lot Part 2. It's going to 3. I don't think we need 4.
No.
I think
we'll be done. We'll be done. We'll finish
be done
this.
in 3. We'll be done in 3. All right. Dave Tieche, John Fortt. I will see you next time.